Hello again, fellow YouTube auto repair enthusiasts. I'm back again with another small repair video. This is my child's 2007 Honda CRV, little 4-cylinder, and we had a little trim problem. If you look at the very bottom of the frame there where the handle is to open the rear hatch, you can see that my trim is missing. You can see the white pop rivets, and that's intentional. What's happened is I've shopped for a number of these cars before we finally settled on this one, and have found that the corners have a tendency to pop on each corner. And I'll zoom in a little bit here. You'll see there are a number of the white receptacles that handle the pin, which I'll show you on the actual trim piece. Now at the bottom there you'll see a hole on each end. That's where an actual bolt will go through. Good design, because that's where a lot of stress occurs. And you'll see the other receptacles, or the other half of the pop rivets I call them. So let me grab this piece of trim and show you exactly what happened. But it does take a lot of beating on that end, and so what I did is I decided to go ahead and remove this and repair it. And whenever I remove these things, I usually end up breaking a bunch of these pins. Well, in this case, I didn't break a one, but there was one that was already broken. And let me see, I got it in my pocket here. What happened was the bolt was still there, but there's another piece that it fits into, which is kind of slides into a mold in the actual trim piece. Well, that surprised me. So there must have been a lot of stress down on this particular receptacle right there. Now what I have is the mating part, which goes into the actual piece of trim. So you'll see the little pin that will go in there. Where my thumb and finger are is the part that slides into the piece of trim. And what had happened was half of this had snapped off, so it wasn't holding. And apparently the bolt was loose. And there was a small missing piece from there too, and I'll show you that. So give me a second to grab the trim piece. Oh, I thought, maybe part of the trim was broken and I might have to buy a new piece of trim. So I thought, oh right, I'll have to go online, figure out how much that is, and then probably take it to a body shop and get it painted. Well, in all actuality, I got onto Honda Parts Now, and I think it was like a $228 piece, not including shipping, and it was already painted. So if you have to replace this particular piece, you can get it for $228 plus shipping, and then add in a few clips. But let me show you where I thought the problem was and really wasn't. Now as you can see, I have slid the piece of trim back in its proper perspective. So now I'm going to remove this, drop it down, and show you not only the pop rivets, but there are 4 bolts. There are 2 by where the handle are, and then the 2 on the end where I had my issue. So I've taken the piece and I've turned it backwards. So this end is where I had the issue, and it's going to go up here. If you see this little bolt right here, that's where that hole is in respect to. And what had happened was, this apparently had slid out. And at first I thought this piece had broken off, and I said, well, yep, got to go get the new piece. But I was incorrect. So I don't know where the piece is. It must have fallen out. And at the same time, the bolt stayed in there. So I bought this little piece. I think it was like $1.64 or something. And this was the little rivet that was broken off. I'm sorry, excuse me, this one. So now I have to put that piece, slide it back in there. Let's reach in my pocket and see if I can get to that. Alright, wrong pocket. There we go. Now you want to keep this little grommet kind of on top, because that just keeps it from banging. Alright, so let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, bolt, bolt, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there are 9 of those pop rivets, 2 of the holders for the screws. And this bolt and this bolt will go through the actual back door, and it'll come up to the inside. Again, this is an area of high stress, and it comes up inside, and you can see 1, 2. Now, I went ahead and took the inside trim off. You don't necessarily have to. There's a little panel that you can get through, and if you're really good and maybe with a universal, I was able to get it off. Take a universal joint and get that in there. So you don't have to necessarily take all this off, but it was just much easier for me to gain access to everything, as you can see. And I'll show you how I pull those trim pieces off. The first piece to come off was the top piece, and I pulled it from here. Then the side pieces, and then the main piece, which goes all along in here. Now, I do caution you, when you start pulling these plastic trim parts apart, you want to do it on a warm day. I usually wait till it's at least 60, if not 65 and warmer. If it gets cold, these things will break. I guarantee it. And again, I always order extras because I know at some point or another I'm going to need it. Now, here's a hint. If you need a lot of these fasteners, if you get the part number off the Honda website, go to clipsandfasteners.com. They're out in Anaheim, California. If you match that number, you can get them in bulk. Sorry, had to cough there. I think I swallowed a bug. Again, clipsandfasteners.com. They're out in Anaheim, California. They have matching clips, and usually in bulk. You say, well, that's a little bit expensive. Well, if you try and price one out at the Honda dealership, they're $2 to $3 to $4 a piece. For $15, I can get 15 to 20. And at some point or another, I will end up using the things. So I go to those guys a lot. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and snap this piece back in. I also like to put on the tips maybe a little lithium grease. When you pull these things, you pull very steadily and start at one side and work your way to the other. Be careful not to stress the actual trim, or you'll cause spidering and possibly break it. I like to put a little grease on there in case I have to pop it off again. So I'm going to dab a little lithium grease on there, or just some axle grease, whatever you have. Yeah, it makes it easier to pop it back off, but it still has enough strength for it to stay in. Alright, I did stop for a while too because my neighbor was blowing the leaves, and I'm afraid that sound would carry over and drown out the narration. So I had another thought when I was putting this trim piece back on as to why, if you remove that inner panel and the trim, it is much easier to see that each of those little pins, let's see if I can get in here without the gate swinging up. You can see that each of the little pins actually seats properly. Alright, well that's not going to work that way. Let's do it this way. Oh, mind your hands because this is sharp metal. Now you see how the pin is seated where my flashlight is? You've got a proper seat. So I checked all of those and to make sure that everything's seated properly. Now you have to give it a bit of a whack to get it in there, so don't feel afraid to give it a couple of whacks, as we like to say, persuasion. And there is one of the two bolts. Here's the other. Alright, now as I had taken this trim off too, a piece of rubber trim fell off. And when I first pulled this, this was the first piece, this upper aspect here, there is a rubber seal there. And that rubber seal keeps that plastic lamp holder from banging up against the glass. Well, I put that back on. I loosened up the 2 bolts. I put it back on, but it didn't want to stay. So how can I make it tacky enough that it'll stay yet not dry out and I don't have to glue it? So I use a little Vaseline, and that's keeping it in place. Then I bolted it up. So next I'm going to start working on the large panel, which I have here. This is if you're looking from the inside. Over to the left, there's 2 bolts and the grab handle, and then the locking mechanism will go into the center. This will be the top that you saw, and underneath, like I said, there's a plastic panel. You can reach those 2 bolts via the plastic panel here, but it is very difficult. So it's just easier to take all this trim off, and then that goes over the locking mechanism. So let me show you how these connect, because that's a bit of a pistol. So again, if you're looking from the inside out, let me grab a piece of trim. Alright, this is going to be up close and personal. So if I am looking at the right side, there's the top. Again, looking inside out, we're going up to the right side. Here's the piece of trim, the side trim. Now the instructions that I have show that you should remove the top trim, then the side trim. But what they don't tell you is this snaps in. It actually has a tongue to it. It's easy to pop the clips off, but you have to remember that there's a tongue to it. So when it snaps in, it's going to fit in there rather firmly. And give me a second, I'll snap it in. Sorry, this is a one-man show. So it snaps in here and snaps in there. There's actually a little bit of a clip right there. So when you pull this off, the instructions say top piece, 2 side pieces, and then this piece. I think it's easier if you pop the top trim off and then start removing this as well as this panel. Because if you try and pop this off without pushing these tabs, or if you can't get behind there and squirt some WD-40 or maybe some silicone spray in there, it's hard because you don't have a lot of room. So I'm thinking if you start working your way down, pop this apart, reach behind there, and push these tabs, because it's tough. That one comes off. Let me switch hands here. And because that one is difficult. Again, you got to pop and push, and then you can work your way down. Again, bear with me. This is a one-man show, so it's extremely difficult because I don't have anybody helping me hold all this stuff. So I've pushed that, and I've pushed this. There we go. And use a plastic tool, or if you've got a metal one, pat it very well. And you'll have to slowly pop that apart with your tool. You have to reach up under there and pop that apart. Like I say, it ain't easy, but it can be done. On the back side here, I'm going to show you, there's at least 12 clips. So you'll have to remember you have 12 clips. And these are different than the ones on the trim. Now I'm going to show you, this is the top piece of trim to the side trim. And it can be a bit of a booger to get off, but see how that fits in there? Now they do give you a small amount of space here. Give you a little tab, and a place to poke a screwdriver very gently, right there. And you pull gently with your fingers. So they do give you a little bit of space there. But again, don't do this on a cold day. You'll break the clips. So I'm going to go ahead and put everything back together. I have pretty much everything back together, but I want you to note that on this handle, notice there's a round end and a square end. If you look here, you will see a round end and a square end. Oh, there are also, I said 12 clips, 2 more here. So that makes a total of 14 clips. So let me get this handle back in there. Let's do that over again. There are some covers here. And if you look where the flashlight is, there's a section on the panel here that fits into. Because eventually when you're done, you're going to snap that up on there. Just remember that it's on the panel there. Let's see if I can give you a better look at that. See, it goes right in here. And it snaps right in. It just has little wings on it. I've already tightened up my bolts, and I will then snap this on. There we go. That's one. And that one's already in. Some days things want to cooperate, and other days they don't. Uh-oh, I got a wing out here, so let me try and correct this, and I'll be right back again. Okay, sorry for those interruptions, but again, it's a one-man show, and when there's a little groove in here that'll help you pop that off with a tool, padded screwdriver, trim removal tool. Now, here's what I was saying about that little panel here, and way up in here is one of the bolts. Actually, I should say screw. Way up under here is another screw to get that trim piece off. And like I say, it's easy to get it off. It's more difficult to get it back on. So again, I think it is easier to remove all the trim panels. So let me put this little panel back on. And there we go. Now when you put this panel on too, make sure the groove's at the top. You'll see there's some fins here and fins here. And on this trim piece, there's an area for it, So you've got to make sure that groove is up. So there we go. Another repair job. I hope this helps. And as my credo, or at least I like to say it's my credo, I'll fix your car, but it won't go far.